The candidates have drawn cards to determine the order in which they will answer. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain quiet. No cheers, no applause, or outbursts of any kind. Today's first topic is one of the most hotly debated issues at hand right now, perhaps especially here in Connecticut, gun control. Chris Keating will ask the first question. Chris?
Mr. Boughton, would you have signed or vetoed the gun control bill that Governor Malloy signed last year, and why or why not?
Well, I think that the parents and the relatives of those folks that were impacted by the horrible tragedy of 12/14 deserved a legislative response. My concern has always been that the legislative response that was come up with didn't address the key issues that face our state. We have a mental health care crisis in the state across our country. We didn't really address that. We had a task force that was raised for it, but there was really no weight put behind it to be able to address those issues. Two, we really didn't do a lot for school safety and security. We put $15 million in to make our schools safer across the state of Connecticut, and the fact of the matter is we would need probably triple that amount of money to make a real impact on that. And so while we spent a lot of time concerned about what kind of flash suppressor a gun has or what kind of magazine it has, we didn't spend time on the heavy lifting. Mental health care is going to require a real input, a real prioritizing here in the state of Connecticut for us to fix it. And that means it's going to require resources and it's going to require all of us working together. So at the end of the day, I would have sent the legislation back to the legislature for more work to address the issues that face our state.
Mr. McKinney?
There are 187 legislators in the state legislature. I'm the only one with the great privilege of representing the entire town of Newtown. Every day I'm an elected official, I know my obligation is to represent the people who sent us to Hartford. I do that by listening to the people who sent me to Hartford, by representing them and their wishes. I wish that day had never happened. I spent the day with the families and loved ones, had friends in that school district. At the end of the day, I was elected by the people of Newtown to be their voice in Hartford. I'm their only voice in Hartford. I'm proud to have been it for 15 years and proud to have been their voice in Hartford during that difficult time. Leadership's about making difficult decisions. There's no easy decision after something like Newtown happens, but you have to make decisions. It's about standing up and doing what you believe for the people who elected you. We did that. We did address mental health issues. We did address school safety. Over half the schools in Connecticut have received money to make their schools safer for our children. I wish it never happened, but I'm proud that we as a state of Connecticut tried to take some steps to solve some tough problems.
Ms. Dean?
Yes, I'm someone who likes to deal with facts and principles, not with polls and what people who may be misinformed say in answer to a polling question. So the facts are, as the Pew Research Center large study last year and the U.S. Department of Justice's large study last year show, those are two independent studies, huge, that when you increase gun ownership with law-abiding citizens, crime goes down. So from 1994 to 2011, crime has plummeted in this country. It's down 70% down gun-related crime between 1994 and 2011. Gun-related homicides are down 40% between 1994 and 2011. So the facts and the principles, which is that citizens have a right to bear arms, and it's the only right protected in the Bill of Rights that uses the words shall not be infringed. So we need to work on facts and core principles. It doesn't matter how many people think something should be eliminated if our core principles say we protect it. Slavery was popular, and if we'd taken just a raw vote, we would still have slavery, but it was wrong. So we need to do what's right.
Mr. Loretti?
I would have opposed the legislation because I don't think it solves anything. Oftentimes we try to justify things by taking an action because people think we need to do that. If you look at what's going on in the country and you looked at the past several incidents that occurred in terms of mass murders, there's a pattern in my mind as to who's doing them and why they're happening. We didn't address the mental health issue, and we need to do that nationally. I also think that the video game industry has gotten a completely free pass on this thing. In my view, it's our behavior. It's not the weapons that could jump off the shelf and do things to people. Just recently we saw an incident in Pittsburgh, I think it was this week, where there was an incident where a youth took a knife and went after several kids. It's our behavior. It's how we treat one another. And I think that it's wrong for us to try to use other things as a scapegoat.
Mr. Visconti?
I would not have signed SB 1160. I sat at the state capitol for days, early in the morning, 2 in the morning, and there was no public debate. We don't know who wrote that law, and as a governor, I would use executive powers for something I think is more important than that law. That's the hundreds of thousands of guns and gun owners that are not complying with the law. I've carried a handgun with a pistol permit for 30 years, and I know thousands of law-abiding citizens, and this is a constitutional infringement. I believe the high courts will rule that this is, and I believe they will rule this on the disability issue. I have an Emmy Award for Disabilities and Possibilities in Florida, where I worked on a television program, and the disabled have the right to protect themselves and to defend themselves, and they need the so-called assault weapon hand grips. This is very important. Our laws, our rights have been infringed upon, and I will use executive powers to not enforce any confiscation as your next governor.
We now have 30-second rebuttals on the same question. Mr. Boughton.
I would just say that one of the challenges with this legislation is that people weren't really heard. They went to the state capitol in droves in the thousands, and they were literally patted on the head and said, "Thank you very much, and we don't care, and we're going to do this behind closed doors." The fact of the matter is that we all have to work together to provide safer schools, more mental health care access, and yes, when appropriate, proper gun safety initiatives that'll make all of us safer in the state that we live in.
Mr. McKinney?
Look, as a Republican leader in the state Senate, Republicans in Connecticut are outnumbered. We live in a state with one-party rule where the governor is a Democrat and Democrats control the legislature. It wasn't a matter of whether they were going to pass a bill. The question was what the bill was going to look like. Leadership means rolling your sleeves up, getting to work, and trying to make a better product for the people of the state of Connecticut, not sitting on the sidelines and simply saying no.
Ms. Dean?
Well, this Sandy Hook tragedy not only led to bad policy in terms of guns, but also bad health control, mental health policy. There is a 5-year void in the investigation report for Sandy Hook. Mrs. Lanza, Nancy Lanza, did get medication for her son. She was involved with healthcare professionals, and we don't know about the final 5 years. We know that some of those medications seem to have made Adam Lanza's behavior worse. We need to look at these issues. These medications are being prescribed for our children, and they are potentially making them more violent, not less so.
Mr. Loretti?
Again, I would go back to the point is how we treat one another. Our individual behavior, I think, is the single biggest deterrent in our society, and we have digressed in many respects. So I think that we need to do a better job with the family structure, and we need to pay closer attention to the mental health issue, which has already been mentioned. But even beyond that, government can't solve all of these situations based on legislation. Look at terrorism is illegal. How are we doing with that? So I think you can point to many different examples that demonstrate that legislation doesn't always solve it.
Mr. Visconti?
Yeah, I'm concerned about the future incremental infringement on our Second Amendment rights. Sandy Hook was a tragedy of epic proportions for all of us, and I'd like to convey to the families in Newtown that gun owners are not your enemy. We're here. We wish we were there. I've said that before because it was a horrible day. But we as Americans have to be careful that we don't incrementally take away the Second Amendment right completely, because the First Amendment rights will be next. Where does it stop?